Okay, we have the situation continuing to develop over in Israel with the hostages being released, with Netanyahu doing a pause or a ceasefire. I have with me today former CIA Tracy Walder to help us better understand what's going on over in Israel. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I want to jump into a big story, or at least one that the mainstream media has tried to take a molehill and turn it into a mountain. But the mainstream media is accusing Elon Musk of being anti-Semitic on Twitter. Now he's over in Israel, boots on the ground, with the president of Israel and also the prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Even the White House here back in the States accused him of being anti-Semitic. Do you think that this is just the mainstream media trying to stoke racial and religious tension every chance they get? Or is Benjamin Netanyahu walking around with an anti-Semite?
So I look at this a couple different ways, to be completely honest with you. And I think I probably take a little bit of hits from my own community as well, because I actually am Jewish. And so I think I look at this from a couple different perspectives. I don't love what he said. I'm just going to be completely honest about it. But the thing is we can either ostracize people who say things that could be construed as anti-Semitic, racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever, ostracize them and put them into this corner sort of more. Or we can, in a way, show them what and why they said what they said, how it was inappropriate, and how maybe we can change the narrative around it. So I actually don't have a problem. I have other issues with Bibi Netanyahu, but him bringing Musk over there, because that's essentially, in my opinion, sort of what they both agreed to do, quite frankly, for damage control. I don't necessarily view it as a bad thing. I mean, I've always been the kind of person that, if someone says something that's wrong or you don't agree with, why don't we show them another and a better way? So I don't view this as bad necessarily, but I will be honest in that I don't love what he said, and I do feel that it has anti-Semitic undertones. I think the White House, the media, whatever, is maybe making a mountain out of this, because in my opinion, there are way bigger issues here than what Elon Musk said. I agree with you on that. I think they're making a mountain of it because of Twitter, or X, excuse me, because he controls X. And what I think is, when we saw what happened with TikTok and the explosion of that Bin Laden was right horrific video, in my opinion, that was very anti-Semitic. His whole letter was anti-Semitic. And then you have Musk with this nuanced anti-Semitic rhetoric. I think it was because these are such large platforms and reach millions, if not billions of people, that it was starting to skew in a way that was maybe inappropriate. And so maybe that's where they're coming from. I don't know. But I do think that there are bigger issues, in my opinion, than this.
Yeah, I do see, the media every opportunity to denigrate X or Twitter any chance they can get. The White House, obviously, they don't like that they were exposed for blocking freedom of speech, suppressing people, trying to control a COVID narrative. So I can see them doing that. At the same time, he's now over with Benjamin Netanyahu, trying to shine light on the truth, or what is going on, giving context. Same thing. He went to the border and they ate him alive for going to the border. But then he starts showing, wait a minute, we've got all these people flooding into the country. And so, right or wrong, I appreciate that he is at least trying to now shine light on what is really going on. What happened in these kibbutzes? How horrible were the deaths and the murders, the attacks on children, pregnant women? So at least he's trying to shine light on that. Whether it was arranged or agreed to, you and I don't really know that, but I appreciate your input on that. Just before coming on with you, I read that they've agreed to extend the ceasefire for an additional 48 hours, and continue this hostage negotiation. Do you think that we will see the return of all 240 hostages, or are some of them going to be held back indefinitely for a future play? What are your thoughts on that?
I hope it's okay to be blunt here. It's just based on what I've seen in the past in dealing with foreign governments at the FBI and CIA. When this amount of hostages is taken, I do not think we are going to see all 250 coming back. Do I want to see all 250 coming back? Of course I do. I think most normal people with a heart and a brain do. But I think that Hamas feels a sense of empowerment with these hostages. If you notice, only one American has been given back, and they still have that 10-month-old baby as well. And I think that's purposeful. I think they know and are using them as bargaining chips, as gross and disgusting as that sounds. They've hit a gold mine in terms of hostages, and hostages to them is really this kind of free ticket to get what they want. And I just don't see all 250 of them coming home in a condensed period of time. Look, over the course of, a year or 2 years, could we see that? Maybe. I think some of them will maybe not make it home alive, although I wish that they did. But I really do think that this is Hamas's form of currency. Hostages are viewed as currency to them. And I just don't see them giving them all back. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I think we have to talk about these things in a blunt way of what is most likely going to happen.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point about them having a gold mine, and I hate to uh, be crass or diminish this in any way, but like when somebody dies, let's say in a car wreck, right, and they're 90 years old, and you go, oh my gosh, that's so horrible. At least they lived a long life. But a child dies, and your heart is like broken, and you're like, oh my gosh, they had their whole life ahead of them. So they're now using this child
Mhm.
as the ultimate bargaining chip. And that does bring me to my next question. I don't know if the White House is downplaying this or if they just can't say anything, but they openly admitted we don't know a lot about what's happening with the American hostages. Do you know, is that purposeful, or do you think Hamas is keeping them in the dark on purpose?
I think there's a couple different reasons for that. And I talked about it a little bit on X. I know a lot of people don't like to use it, but I still do. I think there's a couple reasons. I think, first of all, Bibi Netanyahu needs to sell this deal to the Israelis. He has to. He doesn't have a choice in this matter. And so the reality is unfortunately, Americans are not going to be put at the top of that list, because if you are releasing one hostage for 3 violent Hamas prisoners, that has to make sense to the Israeli people, because this is happening on their soil, essentially. And so I'm not surprised that Israelis are first. I think that makes the most sense in terms of getting public buy-in, for him on this deal. I actually probably believe that the White House doesn't have much information on the American hostages. Comms are non-existent with Hamas. They mostly use landlines, which we don't tap into those. It's really difficult. There's no satellite that can control that. Also, we don't deal directly with them. Neither does Israel. So we are completely reliant on Qatar right now to get that information on them. And so I think that because we are totally reliant on an intermediary to get that information, coupled with the fact that comms, for lack of a better word, are abysmal, with Hamas, and technology is really difficult with them to get information. I think the only information the American government may be getting is from the released hostages, if they had any contact with any of those American hostages. And Israel isn't probably even prioritizing that right now, quite frankly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. My feeling was that the White House literally is in the dark. That they
Yes, I
are,
agree.
yeah, they're just not getting communicated with.
Mhm.
That may be on purpose. Maybe they're saying, wait a minute, the the big brother behind Israel is the United States. Let's hold those for last. We've got a better bargaining chip. I don't know. I hate to value life for life or anything like that, but I
Oh,
see
me
what you're
too.
saying. I see what you're saying, where it's like Netanyahu is going to focus on Israel, and America is going to focus on America. But whatever Hamas is doing through Qatar, we may just totally be in the dark there. The mainstream media in the United Kingdom is pushing an interesting narrative. They're saying that President Biden is the one behind this push to have or extend the ceasefire in Gaza. They say that he's doing this to actually appease pro-Palestinian voters and convince Netanyahu that his advancements on Gaza shouldn't resume. Do you think that once this is all done, do you think Netanyahu will resume, or do you think that they are trying to use this ceasefire to end this conflict?
That's a really good question. I know what I think, but I think everyone's going to get mad at me. I think that in my dealings with Israel in the past, at CIA and at FBI, they don't care what we want them to do and what we don't want them to do. It's not really up to us. They're not beholden to us. I personally think that Netanyahu will continue to level Gaza. I don't see any way that he won't, because the reality is yes, we're trading hostages and prisoners, and I understand that, and I'm great, and I don't want innocent Palestinians to suffer. I don't want that. But the problem is there's no end game in this. What happens if we are out of prisoners to trade and out of hostages to trade, right? What happens? There's no discussion about what's going to happen after that. And because there's no discussion, or at least not a conversation I'm privy to or you're privy to, I think we've sort of left this up in the air. And the reality is Israel is its own autonomous country. They're going to do what Israel is going to do and what they think is best for their national security. Hamas is going to do the same thing. We can't tell them essentially what to do. But I think that because we have no end game, and because we're releasing Palestinian or Hamas prisoners back into Gaza, I think Israel is going to feel even more vigilant and even more militant, probably than they did in the past. And they've always been aggressive, and I think they're going to continue to be aggressive. So I don't see them not continuing to fight in Gaza.
Okay. Just a couple of days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he gave a direct order to Mossad to basically track down and take out any Hamas leaders, regardless of where they are on planet Earth. The CIA obviously operates a little bit different than Mossad. Mossad is known for being really good with intelligence, but also pretty aggressive when it comes to getting what they want. Do you see these orders being fulfilled? Am I going to be okay, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
1,000,000% yes. So like I said, I've dealt with Mossad quite a bit. If you want someone assassinated, they are your person. There is no better intelligence service at assassinations in the world than Mossad. I don't know if that's a great claim to fame or what, but there really is not one. The US, we cannot assassinate people. There is a rule against that. We can't do that. We don't do that, despite what people say. I've never ordered that at CIA. It's never been ordered under my watch when I was there. But but Mossad absolutely does. We saw Soleimani assassinated in Iran. We know that Israel was behind that. If you even look at, what happened in the 1972 Munich Olympics, Mossad went after every single person involved in that attack, no matter where they were, and killed every single one of them. So I have no doubt in my mind, the question is going to be, how are those other countries going to react? And that's why I think Qatar is highly involved in these discussions, because most of Hamas's leadership is there and they don't want to come under attack.
Yeah. A bit. I mean, most of the people that really run Hamas are, 100 millionaires, billionaires. They're living in the lap of luxury. Meanwhile, you have all of these, Palestinians living in poverty and rubble, and they don't care. They literally don't care. They'll use them for human shields. These are pawns in a nasty game. But you're saying 1,000,000%. If he calls for them to be taken out, I'm going to be reporting on that soon.
I mean, look, whether they'll be successful or not, I can't say just because of the geopolitical fire that is the world right now. That I don't know. But you are absolutely right. Most of them are billionaires living in the lap of luxury in Qatar, and the innocent Palestinians are absolutely starving and in the state of abject poverty, and they are not taking care of their people. You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Um, over in Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that he has information that Vladimir Putin of Russia is behind helping Iran in their efforts and funding of Hamas. Do you think that there's any truth to that, or is he simply attempting to vilify Putin and keep Ukraine relevant as funds and weapons dry up for Ukraine, since they are now being sent to Israel?
So I think it's both. I do think that Zelensky, I mean, you have to think about it. He is brilliant in terms of how he uses the media and social media. He and I are the same age. I mean, he's a Gen Xer and he knows sort of how to play to the young folks and how to get things out there in the media. So I do think there is a push by him to maintain this sense of relevancy, if you will. There's no question in my mind that Russia and Iran are friends. They've been friends for a very long time. This is nothing new at all. And I mean, if we look at a lot of the drones and warheads that have been discovered in Gaza, a lot of them came from Iran. Iran, in turn, gets a lot of their weapons from Russia. They have a lot of Russian-made weapons. So I would not in any way, shape, or form be surprised if indirectly, or really quite frankly directly, some of those made their way to Hamas. I think that that's just what we thought and what we knew, because we know that Iran is for the most part arming Hamas, and Iran is for the most part armed by Russia. And so I think in not a direct way, but in maybe an indirect way, yes. So I think he's trying to keep them relevant for sure. But then I also do think that it's a valid and truthful point.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Iran is obviously behind funding many terrorist groups, not just Hamas. They seem to want to go after the ones that have bad feelings towards Israel and the United States. In the past few weeks, however, they have increased their attacks on the U.S. military. And I've read that several members of Congress are wanting to reimpose sanctions or take steps towards retaliation. Are these decisions that the CIA or the FBI would be involved in on a macro level, or does this then cross over into military leadership?
So I wouldn't think the FBI would be involved in that, but CIA, we would absolutely have been involved in that. Not, in this direct sense of like battle planning, but the military would be highly dependent on our read on intelligence and chatter, if you will, that's coming out of Iran and from our sources that are in Iran to guide sort of our next military steps, if you will. So I absolutely believe that the CIA is involved. I mean, we have to remember that Al-Qaeda's new leader, Saif al-Adil, is hanging out in Iran, and he's been hanging out in Iran since about 2002. And they've never done anything about it. So I don't think they care necessarily. And look, I'm going to be very honest. I was not a fan of the Iran nuke deal. And I think that we are probably heading on a reverse course of that right now, given everything that's going on.
I appreciate all the work that you're doing on TikTok and Instagram to make people aware of that. If people want to follow you or learn more, Tracy, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure, you can follow me on Instagram at The Unexpected Spy, or on TikTok at The Unexpected Spy, or on X at Tracy_Walder.
Okay, great. We'll put that up. Well, thank you so much for coming on and helping us, filter this information through, former CIA eyes. Hopefully this thing will continue. Again, neither one of us want to see, horrible things happen to Palestine, but at the same time, what do you do when literally you're next door to a terrorist group that their mission statement is to wipe you off the face of the earth, So I appreciate you coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.